Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name's Julie Blaisbury, and I'm the Client Relationship Director for the Aviation Industry Skills Board. Welcome to our webinar. Before we start, I'd just like to let you know that we do have a Q&A as we go through, but we will be answering questions as we go through. So hopefully most of your questions will be answered during the webinar. However, if we do not get to them, please just send us them through to info@aisb.uk. I'm now going to put you across to our host and facilitator for today's meeting, and that's Suzi George.
Thank you so much, Julie. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Suzi George. I'm Manager of Talent and Careers at Virgin Atlantic. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and I'm super delighted to welcome you to our second webinar in the AISB Education and Guidance series. So today is about you, okay? It's about you and the influence you have on the futures that young people picture as possible. And over the next hour, we're going to take you as a group on a journey through aviation careers. We're going to bust a few myths along the way, but most importantly, we're going to share some practical classroom guidance, some ideas and resources that you can use. Okay, so we want today to be practical and useful for you. And our aim is to help you feel confident in talking to 14 to 18-year-olds about aviation, especially those who may never have seen this industry as one that might be for them. Because we talk to students quite a lot in what we do, we know that when they think about aviation, they automatically think about careers like pilots and cabin crew, two very meaningful careers that we will talk about today. But the reality is far bigger than that, and the skills are very connected to what you teach every day. So we've got a fantastic panel of experts this evening, but before I introduce you to them, I just want to share a few stats that will really help frame how to think about aviation careers. The first one is that aviation is actually one of the most diverse career ecosystems in the UK. Airports are cities of opportunities with hundreds of employers and, tens of thousands of jobs. Secondly, the biggest workforce is the one that students rarely identify with or see. In fact, more than 80% of aviation roles are ground-based or behind the scenes. Number three, there's no single entry point into aviation. In fact, aviation has so many pathways in. It's a really dynamic, squiggly career ecosystem that we have. And it's really important to know some of the ways that you might not have thought about to get into it. And finally, what you teach today already belongs in aviation. Every flight depends on classroom skills. Maths for planning and logistics, science for safety and engineering, English for leadership and teamwork, and digital skills from everything from air traffic to customer journeys. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our amazing panel. What they do will appear next to the names on the screen for you. But first of all, we have Ginny Ledley from British Airways. We have Sophie Jones from the Civil Aviation Authority. Barry Cullen from London Gatwick. We've got Melissa Parler from MAG, Captain Pete Taylor from the Honourable Company of Air Pilots. We've got Jessica Ferrington from NATS, Diane Draper from TUI, Brenda Jeffcoat, who's also from the CAA, and Kevis Glynn from Jet2. So an amazing panel for you tonight that we're going to hear from next. So I'm going to stop talking and we're going to move on to the first section of this evening, which is about the modern aviation landscape. So we're going to have a look at how aviation careers have changed, the skills employers need now, and some of the roles that you might not see. And I'm going to hand over to Ginny to bring that to life for you. Ginny.
Thank you, Suzi. Good afternoon to everybody. Thanks for joining us. So in terms of what has happened, what's changed in the aviation careers space, from an apprenticeship perspective, we've moved and expanded beyond those traditional skill-based apprenticeships, which people are used to in terms of entry points. So that's sort of engineering and all those kind of skill-based to more specialist roles. So we still do the engineering side, still very big and large numbers come through in terms of programs for us at British Airways and across many of the aviation sector. But we're going more into data science, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, project management. There really are a significant number of roles behind the scenes that we'll talk more about as we go on in the next hour. But the most important thing is that every apprenticeship and graduate programme that we all run gives an idea of the scale and complexity of not just an airline, but an airline business within the aviation sector. And I think that's the main learning point that most of our apprentices and our graduates take away from any programme they join us on. So there's a real demand for degree level apprenticeships. That was something that was not offered previously. So we're starting to invest more in those, because I think it's a known fact that you run up quite a lot of funding debt as an individual if you're to go through the traditional route of straight into university. This gives you an opportunity to gain a degree without the cost associated, and also to gain the experience that you need to build the evidence towards your knowledge, skills and behaviours, which underpins every single apprenticeship standard that we have. Data is high in terms of high in demand. And on that note, taking you to the hot skills versus the cold skills, what do we mean by that? So hot skills really are high demand where the growth in our industry is. It's sort of the emotional side, the high stakes. It's the innovative, futuristic side of the aviation sector, versus the cold skills where you'll see a declining requirements, low demand within the industry. It's more about the neutral cognitive sort of side, and it's about sort of maintenance and legacy. So to give you some examples, hot skills are around the things that the industry are really requiring now. As I talked about before, it's artificial intelligence, it's machine learning, it's data analytics, it's cloud computing, cybersecurity, and project management, and all those key skills that we're all investing in now. So that's your hot skills, and where there's high demand at the moment. The low demand, the other end of the scale we're moving away from, is the legacy programming languages, the manual data entry, and the traditional admin tasks. Still need to do them, but a lot of them are being automated. So that's what we mean in terms of the changes just in our industry alone, and what we mean by hot and cold skills. I'm going to hand over now to, I believe, Sophie and or Brenda from the CAA to talk about hidden roles within the edge for you. Ladies.
Thank you, Ginny. So in terms of those hidden roles, I wanted to look more closely and something that Suzi mentioned earlier, actually, that often goes unnoticed, but the vast range of careers in aviation that many people don't see. And again, as Suzi mentioned earlier, most people think of aviation initially, they picture pilots, cabin crew, maybe air traffic controllers. And of course, those roles are absolutely essential. But what we see on the surface is only a fraction of the industry. And behind every flight, every customer journey, and every operational decision, there's an entire ecosystem working quietly in the background. So just like any other large commercial organisation, aviation relies on HR teams managing workforce planning, finance teams looking after budgets and forecasting and commercial decisions, IT specialists keeping systems secure, and project managers driving innovation and change, and even lawyers ensuring legal compliance. So the roles don't look aviation sort of at first glance, but without them, we cannot function. So we then move into some of the operational roles that, again, people rarely think about. The teams in ground handling, coordinating aircraft turnarounds, dispatchers, making sure that every load sheet is correct and safe, engineers, technicians, scheduling teams, operation controllers, customer experience designers, economists, data analysts, and the list goes on. So they're all highly skilled, highly collaborative roles that offer incredible career paths, but also many that students often never hear about. So part of our mission is to widen that window so that young people themselves can see the different roles that are available to them that they may never have imagined even exist. So moving on then, so what employers say they can't find, and again, that goes for all of us on this call, is that we see a lot of consistency with the skills that we need, but it's not always the technical knowledge that's in short supply. It's actually a lot of the time, it's the transferable skills, those human skills and the fundamentals that underpin the great performance in any of the environments that we operate in. So those skills including strong communication, the ability to explain something clearly, listen actively and work well with different teams. Problem solving. So aviation, as I'm sure you'll be able to see, is a fast moving industry, time pressured environment, and things change quickly. And we need people who can stay calm, think through a situation and make good decisions. and confidence to ask questions, to speak up, to make suggestions, and to take ownership. They're all qualities that we as employers struggle to find consistently, particularly in young applicants stepping into their first job. So aviation is far broader and more diverse than most people imagine. And when we see young people, we want to help them see the possibilities that are available to them and build the skills that we need. As Ginny just mentioned, many of this will start with apprenticeships, and many of this will look at us trying to develop those young people into the different careers that they can progress, which we all think are exciting and definitely full of potential. So if we can move on to the next slide, please, Julie. This slide really is looking at the sort of future skills and learning pathways, and really a focus on apprenticeships, as Ginny just mentioned, a great introduction. These apprenticeships that are listed here, and we can share this slide if you would like to see this, because it's obviously quite detailed for this particular webinar, but it really shows the breadth of apprenticeships that us as organisations are already actively using. So what we have done here is we've been working collaboratively across all of the organisations that are members of the Aviation and Industry Skills Board to look at a structured look to see which are the apprenticeships that we're looking at today. And our Future Skills Working Group has mapped these out in the detail that you can see, identifying every apprenticeship standard across every level that contributes to the future skills and learning pathways. So we've found that apprenticeships in aviation aren't just technical, as I just mentioned, and they're not limited just to one particular area. They span across a huge breadth. So the pathways, again, as you'll see here, have been grouped into areas such as communication, critical thinking and problem solving, customer service, digital and AI, engineering, green and sustainability, leadership and management, and then other, because of course there's not enough columns on the piece of paper to catch them all. So when you look across the slide, you'll be able to see just how comprehensive that spread is, from level 2 right the way up to level 7. And there's everything there from customer service, practitioners and data technicians through to project management and AI specialists. What this really tells us is that apprenticeships aren't a side route or a second choice. And again, just really to confirm what Ginny just said, they are an integral part of how our aviation industry is building in its future capability. And that provides fantastic structured pathways for young people and career changers to enter the industry with both practical and experience and recognised qualifications. Thank you.
Amazing. Wow, what a plethora of skills and programs and levels. There's so much there. And something I'm really interested in is if somebody's trying to future-proof themselves, so a young person, what skills, Sophie, are the most in demand right now? And what will be the skills most in demand in the next 5 to 10 years?
Thanks, Suzi. And again, it's a difficult one to say because I don't think there is one singular skill. And as I just mentioned there, they do span both technically and on a behavioural side. So I think from a technical perspective, it's probably the obvious one, but stronger digital confidence, the advanced sort of data literacy, and moving into the sort of AI enabled oversight are the skills that we're looking at coming up now from a technical perspective. But on the sort of more softer side, we're looking at more of the cultural and behavioural strengths that come. So again, that critical skills, constructive challenge, and being able to communicate well. So to stay future ready, we need to make sure those softer skills are equally as important as the technical skills. And I think, what we've certainly seen in our organisation is that, those skills such as leadership and management are becoming far more important maybe now because of the technical. Actually, it's being able to lead people and be able to demonstrate that through.
That's great insight. So useful to understand that. And in terms of soft skills, what soft skills are transferable from other industries into aviation?
So again, I think, looking at some of the things I just mentioned there's many. We have many people that do transfer actually from different industries into the aviation industry. And again, looking really at those sort of key ones, customer experience. So looking at from a young person's perspective, if they've had a part-time role, if they have, within either retail or in other industries, they're a really great skill to be able to transfer in. The digital and data skills, again, now more, at school. I've got 2 daughters of my own. I'm seeing a lot more, there's a lot more now in the data space, and actually being able to transfer those sort of basic Microsoft skills, for example. But also looking at program delivery or project or change management, if it's people that are moving in, that want to either progress into a project management role. I think that the other one, which is probably one that I think is sometimes not even mentioned, is resilience. From both a personal perspective and an organisational perspective, whether that's just getting through different exams or the other, actually being able to demonstrate your resilience is a massive transferable skill that will take you into any organisation.
Love that. Brilliant. Thank you so much. And that leads us beautifully from looking at skills and the diversity of skills from Sophie into looking at pathways and roles. And we're going to have a look, first of all, at roles on the ground. Okay, so the aviation ground-based ecosystems that we've been talking about and the career pathways and huge range of roles that keep our airports running every day. And to do that, I'm going to hand over to Barry and Melissa.
Thanks, Suzi. Yeah, it's as you said at the start of the presentation, airports aren't just these great big buildings that we go into to go off on our holidays. They actually function like self-contained cities. They're operating, and we're operating 24 hours, 7 days a week. We have our own infrastructure, utilities, transportation networks, and security systems. And if you think of an airport as that sort of ecosystem, a single airport can support tens of thousands of jobs. And we looked at airports across the UK, and you look at the total employees on average is 26,470. Now, some of those are employed directly by the airport itself, and that's a sort of 8 to 10% of the workforce work directly for the airport company. But the majority are within the supply chain with third parties and on-site companies. So that's a huge amount of jobs and different roles that are across the airport campus. And Melissa will tell you a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. So yeah, as it says on the slide, there's upwards about 4,000 unique job roles at every airport site, and it spans a wide variety of departments. So you've got aviation, which we've talked on already, but you've got roles in construction, engineering, finance, marketing, sustainability, technology, retail, hospitality, logistics, and even emergency services. So there's on-site police stations, ambulance services, and then our own fire and rescue teams as well, who are upskilled in dealing with the things that go on around airports, not just civilian fires and things. So absolutely so many opportunities and job roles for young people to consider and look at, both in the airport itself, but also in the sort of surrounding ecosystem too.
Wowee, so many different roles. And on that note, I need to ask you, because I'm curious again, what's the most interesting and unique role that you've ever heard of at the airport?
Yeah, so when I first started, our airside operations team take you on a tour of the airfield, and they take you out in a Ranger truck that has got something called the Scarecrow Squawker on it, which is a tannoy that's got over 100 bird calls, and basically it's to clear the airfield of birds that can obviously cause quite serious things if they are to get in the way of aircraft. But it's just an amazing sort of experience to go out on the airfield with this thing going off and sort of with all these different bird calls. And the gentleman that runs that is very much kind of aware of what all these bird noises are and can kind of tell you all of them. It's a really interesting role, and I don't think he ever thought that would be his job, but certainly he has really sort of bought into that, and now, as well as telling you what the aircraft is, he can also tell you what the birds are as well.
It's fascinating. So we move millions of passengers and hundreds of thousands of tons of cargo through airports each year. And that, as we keep saying, that depends on a vast ecosystem of airport colleagues and third parties. We've got everything from airfield operations, air traffic control, ground handling, baggage systems, customer experience, security screening, terminal management, and facilities engineering. So there really is an opportunity for pretty much everybody. So they're a great place to come along and work.
Yeah, and I think I was speaking to our decarbonisation graduate, and I thought she put it really well. So she talks about the airport as being a town with a runway at the end of it. So she talked about the fact that the terminal is like a big shopping mall. We've already mentioned all of the different sort of transport routing, the hospitality, the retail, and all the other roles that go alongside it. So yeah, a town with a runway at the end, I think really kind of encapsulates what an airport is. And they do continue to evolve. They are complex, innovative ecosystems. They integrate latest technologies. We are always looking for digital transformation, as been mentioned before. And with that, there's going to be new opportunities coming through all the time as new technology lands, and we're looking at new ways to expand as well.
Yeah, and those major expansion programs are really critical across the whole of the country. A number of airports have flagged their expansion programs and will include large-scale infrastructure development, and that enables some of that innovation to come through in green skills construction projects and making sure that everything that's being done is being done to the highest standard and making sure that there is growth there in terms of green skills careers. There's also innovation and investment in sustainable aviation fuel. So the operations on the ground need to be sustainable, as do the planes in the sky. And what that'll help to do is future-proof aviation whilst enabling growth projects to take place as well.
Yeah, and I think
That's
it's
something
all
that
about.
comes up quite a lot. What kind of roles will what is SAF and what kind of roles will it create for the future?
Yeah, so SAF is sustainable aviation fuel. It's a low carbon alternative to the original fossil fuels that we use normally in jet fuel. And so it is used in cooking oil, and kind of it comes from feedstock. So forestry and agricultural waste also kind of play into it. But it does mean that it can really reduce emissions, and it is the aviation industry's biggest fight back against carbon. Like, it's our decarbonisation sort of goals. It's at the forefront of all that as well. And the idea is that it's designed to be a drop-in fuel, so you can use it with current aircraft engines and the airport infrastructure that is in place already. But actually, I think moving forward, we're going to see a lot of new opportunities in terms of people that are auditing the airports on using it, making sure we've got chemical engineers or people that are aware of how it differs. I mentioned before about the fire and rescue service. They're going to have to understand how to sort of deal with these fuels as well. So it's going to change some people's jobs, and then also bring some really exciting new ones in that green growth space, which we know is really important for both the industry and then the UK economy as well.
And I think one of the aims that we're always looking to do is how we can drive skills and opportunities for the future. And working with, as we've mentioned already, our supply chain, that's really important, and helping them to see how they can make a difference. So through that, we've looked at how our procurement contracts can make sure that apprenticeship opportunities are being realised, and having engagement with local early talent pipelines. And that enables those suppliers to actively contribute to workforce development, future skills, and the need within the communities that are most affected by airport operations. So it's really important for us to be able to do that. And I think, Melissa, you're going to talk about the local impact around that as well.
Yeah, so I think all airports have got these teams of community outreach, kind of making sure that that impact is as minimal as possible, or that it's a positive impact. So we can shape that kind of regional outcomes by setting expectations for local hiring. So either ourselves will have KPIs towards that, or you might find that within that procurement will say that the people that we work within our supply chain need to recruit from local areas. We'll have SME engagement, so not always working with the biggest companies, but the ones that we think are going to get the most benefit from working with us. And then that community investment. So there's a lot of different opportunities for local communities to get something back, I suppose, from the airports that operate in their area. And it just kind of cements us as that kind of major economic contributor within the areas that we work.
Absolutely. And it's really important for us to embed social sustainability what you'd hear of as corporate social responsibility, and looking at the initiatives that are going to make a real difference. You know, us and the people that we work with, we want to ensure that those social value goals are realised, whether that be through environmental commitments or whether it's about equality and inclusion standards, and making a real measurable contribution to the wider environmental sustainable goals that organisations are looking to deliver. So it makes not only a difference to the businesses themselves, but the communities that they serve as well.
Interesting. And if you were to choose one, Barry, if an initiative to almost highlight, what would it be, and what difference is it making right now?
I think there's so many, certainly, and speaking to the audience that we are, teacher encounters are great. So we've welcomed teachers into the airport, had them visit out on the airfield, see how operations work across the whole of the airport. And I think that then lends itself to them going back into schools and being really informed about what opportunities exist. And that then has a direct result, because we have young people then coming in to do work experience or gain apprenticeships. So it really helps with that engagement and helping people to realise the opportunities that exist.
Fantastic. So interesting, so unexpected. There's so much information there, and so many things that I've kind of learned every time I listen to you talking. So thank you so much for bringing to life the ground ecosystem. We're now going to move on to from roles on the ground to looking at roles in the air. So the roles that keep our aircraft safe whilst in the air. And we're going to start off by taking a look at flying career pathways. And I'm going to hand over to Captain Pete in just a second. But the webinar we did for parents, we had a lot of questions around getting into the world of being a pilot, around things like aptitude testing and kind of medical prerequisites. So I wonder, Pete, if you could start with just giving us a little bit of insight into, is it advisable to undertake aptitude tests before thinking about or going into pilot training?
Absolutely, yes. The aptitude is basically your measure of piloting ability, if you like, and it's really important to establish that to begin with, because as you can imagine, pilot training is very costly, either to an individual or to a sponsoring airline. So we would recommend you go and take out some aptitude tests. The Honourable company of pilots who I represent carry those out. And basically, we're looking at three basic things. The first is sort of hand-eye coordination, how you see what you see out of the cockpit, and then how you manipulate the controls to achieve a desired sort of flight path. Secondly is mathematics. We do an awful lot of mental arithmetic, so it's basically maths testing. And the last one is your sort of mental capacity for processing information, because as you can imagine, in a cockpit, there's an awful lot of information coming at the pilots, and it's very important you've got the ability to sift that information for the most relevant, most important, high demand information, process that and action it, and discard what is less important. So yeah, very important that you sort of establish what your level of aptitude is before you commence training.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And with that in mind, with what's required, are there any medical requirements that the people on the call tonight, if they're talking to young people, that they need to kind of think about or consider? What would they be?
So what you've got to have to undergo commercial pilot training is what's called a Class 1 medical, and that's only administered by Civil Aviation Authority approved doctors. And it's basically, it's the obvious stuff like good eyesight, good hearing, good physical health, good mental health. But I think that the important thing to consider are there's some very sort of issues that you might not think would stop you from being a pilot, such as color blindness, epilepsy, any sort of heart arrhythmia, anything like that can actually prevent you from being a pilot. So again, before you embark on spending a lot of your own money or a company sponsors you, it's again finding out, have we got the basic medical necessities sorted out first. So yeah, the two important things we stress to people setting out on a pilot career is aptitude testing and medical fitness.
Brilliant. That's so useful, and so useful to consider before you get yourself further down that route into the career. there's a lot of myths around being a pilot. Can you myth bust a little bit for us and tell us what's
Yeah,
true?
certainly. If you'll pardon this terrible pun, it's not rocket science. Okay, there is a lot of ground schools and a lot of academics to go through, but one of the common myths is you need a degree in engineering or aeronautical engineering to be a pilot, which is absolutely not the case. I would say the baseline minimum would be 5 passes at GCSE level, with maths and physics as a must. But it's more exorbitant, the volume of information, rather than the technical difficulty of it all. Secondly, it's had the sort of in the past, it's been a very sort of exclusive sort of old boys club, and it certainly is not now. We are really working hard at diversity and inclusivity across the board to as many people from as different backgrounds as possible. And again, secondly, it's thought as it's very, very selective and almost impossible to get into, which it's not. It is competitive, but a lot of companies like British Airways, Virgin, TUI are running sponsorship courses for junior pilots. So there's plenty of opportunity. But I think one thing I would stress finally is the view that you get paid an absolute fortune and you never go to work is pretty much a myth as well. Sure, there's the long haul pilots that probably have the best job, because you go to some exotic destinations, and because of the nature of flying for long periods of time, you do get more time off. But what you are likely to start off with is sort of EasyJet or Ryanair, in sort of doing very short hops in the middle of the night, which are not sort of as glamorous as it may seem. So there's some of the myths that I'd like to sort of try and knock out of the park, if you like. So that's my perspective on it anyway.
And sort of keeping on that theme, based on your experience, you've talked about some of the, I guess, pros and cons a little bit there, but what would you say are the real pros and cons of this career for you?
I think one of the biggest pros is you get to fly an aeroplane and you get paid to do it. I mean, most people who go into the pilot stream are extremely passionate about aviation, and it's all they've ever wanted to do, and to sort of fulfill that career achievement is absolutely fantastic. And it goes with all the other stuff, like, you're a member of the team, you're a team leader. Every day is different, very dynamic work environment. I think some of the cons are that there is very long hours. You either get out of bed very early in the morning to go to work, or you get into bed very late in the morning when you get home from work. You can be away from home a lot, so it can be disruptive to domestic life, working weekends, working bank holidays, public holidays. Whichever religion you follow, you may be away for the major religious festivals. So that can be some of the downsides of being a pilot.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So useful. And I'd love to now lead into another really important career that you will relate to, being a pilot, Pete. And I'm going to move on to Jessica from NATS. And I'm wondering, Jessica, if you could kind of bring to life a little bit, what are some of the misconceptions around the role of the air traffic controller?
Yes, absolutely. So I think there are quite a lot of misconceptions when it comes to air traffic control. The first one being we are in the air section, but air traffic controllers do actually sit on the ground. Another key one is that all air traffic controllers sit in an airport tower. That is not the case. We have approximately 7,000 flights that come into and out of the UK every single day, and the majority of those flights are handled by controllers that sit in centres, one up in Scotland and one in the south of England. So not many people know that, and a couple of others. So unlike the majority of pilot training, unless you get a scholarship, you are paid to be an air traffic controller. So it's always good getting paid. And you also don't need a degree to become an air traffic controller, similar to being a pilot. You need to be 18, you need to have 5 GCSEs at grade 4 or above. And similar to a pilot as well, you have to undertake a medical, but we have a class 3 medical assessment. And similar things to what Captain Pete said before.
Wonderful, thank you. And kind of along that same lines, apart from the role that you're talking about, what other roles are there at NATS, and how would you apply for a role at NATS should you wish to pursue that?
Yeah, so similar to an airport, airspace has a whole infrastructure behind it. You sort of imagine these roads in the sky, and there's lots of people that really need to put lots of effort into maintaining it. I'll highlight just a couple of those roles. So we have air traffic assistants, which support controllers in the operation rooms. We also have pseudo pilots. So, our trainees need to learn somehow. We have people in simulation rooms being 30 aircraft all at one time and providing the radio telephony or communications to our controllers. Engineers is a key one. And when I say engineers, I think a lot of people probably picture hard hats and high-vis jackets, but that's not necessarily the case. We have engineers that sit in our centres and they are shift workers managing the 24/7 operation. But we also have engineers that are sat either at home or in the office working on technical design and system integration, and even to our radar and comsite engineers who will travel all across the UK to make sure that our air traffic controllers can see and hear the planes in the sky, which is quite important. And of course, the professional and business support roles, but I think a lot of those have been covered already, so I won't go into too much detail.
So many roles again that you just wouldn't imagine are there, right? And if there's if kind of the people who are on the call today want to really help students prepare for some of those roles now, what could they be telling them to prepare?
Yeah, so I think most educators will have heard transferable skills. That's definitely key. Things like Duke of Edinburgh, volunteering are really key to building up those skills. But for aviation specific, there are things like air cadets to get involved with, air shows, plane spotting. But just to emphasize, if you hate all of those things, that doesn't mean that you would hate a role in aviation. I know I certainly didn't enjoy air cadets, but here I am absolutely loving my career. So it's not the be all and end all. And then, of course, broadening the bubble. So I think a lot of people, everyone here probably has their own bubble of roles they know exist and don't exist. Nowadays, everyone has so much information literally in the palm of their hand. So the advice that I'd give to educators is maybe to encourage their students to utilize that, follow some creators, content creators that are relatable to them, and research and find out more about those careers.
Fabulous. And thinking about a kind of an advice as well, some of these roles are quite the stereotypes, isn't there, behind certain roles in aviation? And how would you advise, or how can educators challenge stereotypes and really get this across to students who want a career in aviation?
Yeah, I think this is really key. And it's really key for everyone in the aviation industry. We have so many roles that are coming out, and we do not have enough people in the future workforce to fill them. So we want to be encouraging everyone possible from all sorts of backgrounds to be pursuing careers in aviation. And I think two of the main stereotypes, so the first one being you have to be good at STEM to get into aviation. And that's not the case. STEM subjects can definitely help. But there's all sorts of reasons why students wouldn't be excelling in STEM subjects, but could still excel in a career in aviation. So the first one, challenging that and saying, actually, you might not be good at maths per se, but that doesn't mean that you can't go on to an engineering career. It really does depend on how you apply certain things. And with apprenticeship schemes nowadays, you don't need to necessarily have such a high level of education to get into things. And then secondly, and I think Captain Pete talked about this as well, about aviation being only for boys. And I think that is like such a big stereotype. And part of the reason that exists is because of biases in languages, for example. The amount of times I've heard, oh, the pilot, what did he say? And I'm like, oh, actually, I'm talking about a female, so not he. And just those subtle changes can really make a big impact. So language changes, imagery changes, and then also promoting relatable role models as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So interesting.
Yeah, And speaking of relatable role models, Suzi, you've had a vast career in aviation as well, and I believe you started as cabin crew. So what are some of the core requirements for that?
Fantastic. Yes, I did start as cabin crew. And I think when we think of crew, we think customer focus, we think customer service, which is really key to the role of cabin crew, but it is a safety critical role. And I think some people when they come forward and they want to get into it, they don't see some of the training that sits behind that. There's quite robust medical and safety training. Things that you might not realize you have to do. You have to be able to swim 25 meters in a swimming pool and climb into a raft unaided. You have to be able to reach, for Virgin Atlantic anyway, 210 centimeters, and people sometimes assume that's a glamour thing. We want, you know, cabin crew to be tall and look a certain way, but it's not. It's a safety requirement because we have safety equipment, for example, inside overhead lockers. So definitely things like being able to assume a brace position. There are some physical things, but yeah, it's a customer service role, but it is also a safety role too.
I think that's really cool. And I think if you're not really in the aviation industry, you probably wouldn't have thought of swimming of all things.
Yeah, I know.
But that's just one example, I guess, of a skill that people could have and be working on as a hobby that really does apply to aviation, but they don't really know about it. So other than swimming, I guess, are there any other sort of skills or experiences people could be building upon to enter as a cabin crew in the future?
100%, and they can be building on it now from ages 14 to, you know, to 18. So customer service, communication, empathy, teamwork, resilience, all things that, you know, you can do through, you know, getting jobs or you know, getting experience and getting involved in activities. Every time you turn up for a flight, you're joining a new team. So being able to, you know, understand team dynamics and you know, how to, you know, playing a part. Making decisions under pressure, staying calm. They're all skills that you can practice before it comes to the point where you know you want to choose that you want to kind of go for that role. So communication, empathy, teamwork, resilience, definitely some core ones.
Amazing. And I guess conscious of your vast career as well. So I know that you've held a cabin crew role, but what other roles can being cabin crew lead to?
So many different. So I've been in aviation for 28 years now. I went to university. So my route was I did go to university, I did study, but came out wanting to do something very practical. And you know, cabin crew was a great entry route to you know, almost building skills and communication, dealing with situations that then took me into other roles. I've had 13 roles in that time. I was a trainer, became a training manager. I was a crew manager, L&D consultant, apprenticeships manager. So I've had a very squiggly career, like many colleagues that I have in the business. And I'm sure there are a few people on this call today that have also had quite a squiggly journey, because you know, it is a wonderful ecosystem, as I think we've talked around lots of different elements where you can use your skills to jump into lots of different exciting areas. So lots of opportunity.
Thanks, Suzi.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me some questions. That was lovely. And we're actually moving on to the last element of our webinar this evening, and this is quite an exciting last place to visit because it's about the hidden workforce that Sophie was talking about earlier. We're going to have a look now at the careers that quietly power aviation. They're really important, but they're quietly behind the scenes, and the roles that your students might not actually be able to see the pathways in because they're not obvious. So I'm going to hand over now to Diane.
Thank you, Suzi. So, yeah, as an industry, we offer a really broad range of apprenticeship pathways, but they extend far beyond the traditional engineering or operational roles that people might associate with aviation. So as Sophie mentioned earlier, it's really important to remember that airlines essentially are just like any other large corporate business out there. So behind the scenes, we rely on a real wide variety of professional teams. That's all the way from marketing to HR, digital, customer experience, analytics, commercial strategy, finance, project managers. There's so many different areas. And that means that apprenticeships and entry-level opportunities are available in areas that a lot of people might not necessarily initially associate with us as an industry. Apprenticeships are great because they're suitable for all ages. There are no age restrictions, and they're across such varied levels. So right the way from school leavers up to those people seeking a career change. And they offer a really practical, supportive route into the industry that combines both learning and on-the-job experience. Government guidelines and funding can change from time to time, and that can influence what we're able to offer at any time. But as a norm across our industry, we will usually have level 3 apprenticeships in maybe the more traditional areas such as aircraft engineering, network or operations control, and customer facing or retail environments. But beyond that, our early talent teams are always working really hard with our existing hiring managers to identify other entry-level roles that could be aligned to apprenticeship standards, and those could be across marketing, commercial, digital and data. We sometimes have, sort of like rotational programs that go across multiple departments, and we also have leadership pathways as well. Some of those leadership pathways, as I mentioned, we have level 6 apprenticeships, such as our chartered management apprenticeships, and then also level 7. However, funding on level 7 has recently changed, and we're trying to negotiate around, or I guess navigate around that to see how we can, sort of still offer opportunities in those areas in the future. But level 7 that we've offered in the past has been around sort of finance, analytics, and management. I guess as well as that, also it's just important to understand or to realise that it doesn't always have to be an apprenticeship. We have lots of entry-level roles, so roles where we look for really quite minimal skills to join us as an organisation or join us as an industry. But as you've mentioned there, Suzi, squiggly careers is it's quite a common thing within aviation. So our young people might come in and start in the one area of the business, but end up with a career in a completely different area of the business. So I just always encourage our educators and our young people to really research and just see, the real breadth of opportunities that do exist within our organisations.
Brilliant. So interesting. So much opportunity there, Di. And I know you recruit for experienced hires rather than early talent, but what's the most unusual role that you've recruited?
Yeah, so I suppose if I talk about the unusual ones, it's usually the ones that give me a bit of a headache in terms of, goodness, how am I going to find someone that does this role? Probably in the last 12 to 24 months, I would say that the main focus and those roles that have given me the biggest headaches are usually in the data science or analytics areas, or also in sustainability. And two roles that sort of stick in my head at the moment are, we had some data science roles, but we needed the individuals to be very specialised in terms of understanding aircraft fuel, because the things that they were going to be analysing, the data that they were going to be looking at, was all around the efficiency of fuel, sort of in the aircraft, and how we use that fuel in the aircraft to optimise it. And the other one was very much, it was almost like a hybrid between someone who needed to understand engineering very well, but also understand data analytics very well, because it was around trying to schedule our aircraft in and out of our hangars for their maintenance. So they needed to understand both of those worlds and bring them together. And that can create a real challenge for me as a recruiter sometimes, trying to find those hybrid people. But again, I think it just shows the real breadth of roles that are out there. And on the sustainability side, again, it was around, fuel to a certain extent, because it was around decarbonisation and emissions. And we needed a project manager who also understood the technicalities of the, the work that they and the projects that they would be involved in. So just really sort of unusual blends of roles as well, to try and find people that have those skills. But I think that's what keeps me challenged and loving my job. So
Love it. Keeps it interesting.
Absolutely.
And one of the saddest things sometimes is when people I know when you find people have gone down the wrong path when they come to you, I'm sure, Di. What mistakes or myths do you most commonly come across when young people have set their hearts on joining the
Yeah,
airline?
I think that's really difficult. I think it's around understanding the pathways into the different roles. As I've mentioned, you don't have to come in on an apprenticeship, but if you are looking to come in on an apprenticeship, make sure you really understand the pathway and the entry level for that apprenticeship. I think that young people, quite rightly, are sometimes thinking, I need to get as high an academic qualification as I can to, put myself in the best position of getting the best job with an organisation. Whereas actually, for our engineering apprenticeship, and it's true across most of our airlines, or most of the airlines on the call today, we prefer to bring in our engineering apprenticeships at quite a young age. We bring them in sort of a level 3, I believe it is, those school leavers, just looking for GCSEs, usually in maths and English, because what we like to be able to do is grow our own engineers. They're working on our own aircraft, they're working on our own aircraft types, they're working in our own environments, and they will go through the training and the sort of the qualifications that they need to become qualified on our own aircraft. So yeah, sometimes it's difficult to see students who've said, I'm going to go off to university, I'm going to go and get my engineering degree or my aeronautical degree, and then they come back to us and we're like, oh, actually we needed you straight out of school, or it was such an easy pathway or a more relevant pathway for you to come to us straight from school. So I think that's a big thing to stress, is just make sure you understand the right pathway into that chosen career that you want to pursue.
Brilliant, really crucial advice. Thank you so much. I'm going to give you a break because I've been asking you lots of questions, Diane. I'm going to target Ginny now. And Ginny, I'm going to ask you in the same sort of vein, because I think this is a really important topic because we need to get the right advice across. If you were talking to school leavers about applying for an apprenticeship now, what's the one piece of advice that you would give that you think would be the most powerful piece of advice?
For me, it's about read the question. And that are being asked of you, whether it's in a video interview that you do in the lead up or in your original initial application. Every stage of an assessment centre, read and listen to what's being asked of you. There's so many people that tell us how great they are and all this wonderful wealth of experience, which is amazing and equally as valuable, but they fail to answer the question and they're screened out very early on in the process. So if there's one piece of advice to educators and to individuals, is once an individual has made an application, get a third party, either yourselves as educators or a parent or carer, to read over that their answer, their response, because you'll see it objectively and you'll see whether they've answered the question or not and be able to adjust it before they submit. So that's probably the one piece of advice. And the second thing is, don't worry about how small some of these programs are and the numbers that we take as an airline perspective. You could be one of those 6. You could be one of 16,000 applying, but actually you could come down to being one of the 6 successful we take on a degree programme, for example, the CMDA. We're not looking for fully fledged individuals. We're looking for people that we can develop, as Diane rightly said.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm going to sneak one more tiny one in, Ginny, if that's okay, before we move on. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
What's the best support that people on the call today could give their students in applying for a programme? So, you've talked about the piece of advice you would give our students, but what's the advice you would give our educators in supporting right now?
I think for me, it's to help individuals to really look at the skills they've got and the skills that they've developed and the knowledge that they've developed. So, whether it be part of a sports team, whether it's working as a barista at the weekend or in a Saturday job, whatever that might be, they've all got transferable skills. And I think for me, the educators would really help the individuals by thinking laterally and talking to those individuals about where their passion is, where their strengths are, where their interest is, because that's where you want to kind of help them, and also to start talking about, okay, so what does that pathway look like? What do you have to get? And what skills have you got that you can use in your application process, and make sure that those come through, because a lot of the 14 to 18-year-olds don't think laterally, and I think that's where the educators can really add value.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And final piece of the puzzle tonight is connecting how the roles and the pathways, if you like, connect into something that's quite practical and meaningful. And I'm going to hand over to you, Brenda, now to finish the puzzle for us before we close for the evening.
Well, that's a big task, but thanks, Suzi. I'll give it a go. I have the absolute privilege to share a fantastic free resource, an interactive career in aviation and aerospace map that I'm delighted to say the content has been provided by the members from the Aviation Industry Skills Board. So there's quite a lot of careers visible on this map. It's a really engaging way for learners to explore the huge range of careers across the aviation and aerospace industry. And it's each role, it includes an overview of what that role actually is. It gives you a brief description on what you do, the key skills that are required for that role. So I think a lot of people don't know, so this is a nice way to find out. And then what are the different entry routes to get into a career in that particular role? And where possible, I've tried to include some fun facts about what it's like to do that job to keep it nice and engaging. But what I love most about this map is how it helps people see that there isn't just one aviation pathway. Skills, as we've said throughout this call today, are very highly transferable. There are many different routes into the industry, whether that's through apprenticeships, going to college, coming through university, or even a career change. I think it's very important, and the teachers are really good at this, but it's okay to not to know what you want to do at this age. A lot of us didn't, I would say. A lot of them still don't. So just to encourage students to follow the subjects that they enjoy, to say yes to opportunities. And we all had to start somewhere. You can develop on the role, you can progress within the role, you can progress within a different company, but within this organization, within this industry, you never stop learning.
Love that. Brilliant. Such a useful resource, which we're going to give, which everyone will have access to after today. And that kind of leads us to, thank you so much, Brenda, to just signposting you to some really useful resources. Trusted places that you can confidently signpost your students to that will avoid them, getting any outdated or misleading advice. First of all, we just want to show you the aviation virtual work experiences with SpringPod through some of our people on the partner companies on the call today. And something quite exciting for us as a board, we're launching 5 virtual work experiences, aviation ones with SpringPod later on this year. And they're really, really fantastic. And please do have a look at these because they give really realistic insight into aviation careers through interactive simulation. So they're very practical. There's real employer input from experts. And the activities are designed to build confidence as well. And where they're really beneficial is that they reach students who might never get access to in-person, face-to-face work experience. And for you, they'll give you that link from classroom learning to real aviation roles as well. So really useful to have a look at. Here are some of our career sites and some other useful resources for you. You can, really do have an explore of some of these. We've got some other useful resource links here. I'm just going to signpost Elevate Her Aviation as a really meaningful one, just to pick one out there. But we're coming to the close now. I just wanted to say the biggest thank you to you for joining us, and especially to our amazing panelists tonight, the experts who hopefully have brought to life some great stuff for you. We hope this session has really helped you ignite your interest, inspired you to take some of this stuff back into the classroom tomorrow, and has given you some confidence in talking about careers in aviation. So please do stay connected with the Aviation Industry Skills Board for future webinars and resources. Thank you so much, and a very good evening to everybody on the call.